Hi, welcome to segment 3 of our 6-segment series on healing the soul. In segment 1, we talked about past life trauma. In segment 2, we talked about early childhood trauma. Today, we're talking about soul imprints and soul fragments. If you missed any of those segments, you can catch them right here on this channel. A soul imprint is when the soul makes an impression of its environment in the physical world. And it's done through the physical body, through the 5 senses, which would be sight, sound, taste, smell, and touch. So an impression that felt like a love impression will have a very nice imprint on the soul. But an impression of the environment through the 5 senses can feel like a fear impression. When there's a fear impression, it becomes a fear imprint on the soul, which means it has a lower vibrational energy. If it's a positive impression, it makes a positive imprint on the soul, which is going to be of a higher vibration. It's going to be more in alignment with the truth of who we are. But when it's actually a fear impression, it's really a false impression that feels real. And it becomes imprinted like a stamp on the soul and becomes impressed upon it. And if it wasn't processed, if that fear consciousness did not get transformed into a higher level of consciousness, that means there's a lower level of consciousness imprinted on the soul. And what happens is, because we're light beings, we are soul consciousness, pure light and love. That's all energy, but so are these impressions, because these impressions come from the emotions that are associated with the event that impressed upon us. So emotions are also energy. So it's basically like a pocket of energy that gets stamped into the soul, but is very much alive like energy, very much alive like we are as souls. So what it's really doing, it's tainting our soul. It's giving us consciousness of fear living within our beautiful divine light. And what happens is it happens on the physical journey because we're now in this physical body, and certain things happening outside of us in our environment sometimes feel unsafe to us as a physical being. And what happens is now the ego jumps in to protect the physical being so that the physical being can stay alive. It doesn't realize that the soul, which is the true essence of who we are, is always alive and can never die. We are energetic beings. We never ever die. We're always in this divine consciousness. But when the ego steps in, what it does is it goes into that state of fear, because now when there's a negative emotion attached to an event in the physical world, it creates a fear consciousness called a survival consciousness. And this survival consciousness is fear of not being enough for the world, this fear of being a disappointment, a fear of not belonging, a fear of losing someone we love in the physical world, a feeling of something happening to us in the physical world. These are all negative impressions of our environment, and they get imprinted on the soul. As an imprint on the soul, what happens is, if the charge, the emotional charge associated with the event is very powerful, it could become what's called a soul burden. It could become what's called something so heavy on the soul that the soul is being tormented by it. And then what happens is, because it's so difficult for the soul to handle, it becomes rejected by the soul. And then that part of the soul that's holding on to that energy of negative vibration basically is retreated away from the soul and is hanging out in the layers of the auric field. But it is attached to the soul by a thread of consciousness. It was basically pushed out of consciousness. It was pushed so deep and so far away from awareness because it was too much to handle. And basically, you dissociate from it. That's a fragment. That's a part of us that's fragmented off, hanging on by a thread because it can't just disappear from us as much as we want it to. It's still there and it's hanging on, but we have pushed it so far away from us because it was making us feel so disconnected from the world. The problem is it's still feeding us information based on that emotional charge. So if that fragment feels very alone and disconnected, we still have a part of us that's going to feel alone and disconnected. So even though we've pushed it away, it's still affecting us and it's showing up in our life, in everything we do. So if this part feels a sense of unworthiness, that could show up in work performance, in our ability to connect with others, in our ability to parent, in our ability in intimate relationships, in our ability to connect with friends. And the way it's going to show up is through this consciousness. But we don't understand that it's happening because we push it so far away from our awareness. So this is a soul burden that was just too much for the soul, and it was rejected and pushed away. The mind has decided, with the help of the ego, this is not a part of me, but it is a part. It's a part of the soul. Now, although it feels fragmented, the soul is never really broken apart, but there are fragments of the soul that can be disconnected from the rest of the soul. It feels like a complete disconnection. And we do that. The ego does it for us so that we can continue to function in the physical world and still feel safe, because that part of us doesn't feel safe. It went into survival consciousness. But since it's feeding us that consciousness, we keep living through that survival consciousness. So what happens is if that part feels unworthy, or like I'm not enough, or I'm a disappointment, or I'm a bad person, I'm a bad child, I'm a bad partner, whatever you're feeling, it's feeding you that information. And since it's feeding it to you, it's basically running your life because now you're acting on it and you don't realize. So if it's feeding you things like, I always get abandoned, or no one could love me, it might affect your intimate relationships with a partner in your adult life. If it's feeding you feelings of, I'm not smart enough, it could affect you in the business world where you keep yourself small and limited. If you feel that, if this part of you feels unheard, you may have a hard time expressing your voice. If this part of you feels unseen, this part of you was neglected, you may find yourself feeling that nobody sees you, nobody acknowledges you. So that keeps you small because you don't think that anybody's ever going to acknowledge you. And what happens is now what we're doing is we're suppressing all of our beautiful divine gifts by keeping this part of us suppressed. So to heal that soul burden, that fragment, and to help heal the other imprints and impressions that pull us out of alignment with the truth of who we are, it's important for us to do deep inner work, especially with soul burdens that have fragmented off. And the way to do deep inner work, it can be done on your own if you could do it through a meditation. You want to do it through a way that you get into a trance state. And I say that because you need to be removed and disengaged from the world that you're fearful of, because it's part of you, remember, is basically fearful of the physical world. This physical world, this physical experience caused this part, okay, to feel bad. So to disengage from the rest of the world, to disengage from all of the distractions outside of you, and to just go inside of you into the consciousness, It's important to get out of this logical and intellectual mind and to bring yourself into a deeper state of consciousness, which we can call the alpha state, which is a slow down of consciousness, a more inward focus, or a theta state, which is even deeper than that. And the way to do that is you can do it through meditation. You could do it through self-hypnosis. You could do it actually by journaling if you can get yourself in a little trance, and it's called even automatic writing, where you go into a little bit of a trance just by bringing yourself focus inward, and you close your eyes and you start journaling while you're in the trance. If you cannot do it on your own, if you get stuck and you can't really reach that burden inside of you because it's so disconnected from you, it feels so far away, or maybe it's being protected by your ego, and the ego won't let you go to that part of you, then you may need to work with a practitioner that does that inner healing work, shadow work, soul healing work. It can be done that way. But no matter how you decide to do the healing work, it's very important healing work because it is affecting you in your physical life. It's feeding you information that's false about who you are and about the world. The world can be, yes, a very scary place, but it's also a projection of how we feel inside, which makes it a lot more scarier than it is, because the world also offers a lot of beautiful opportunities for growth, for evolution, for expanding our consciousness. So you want to bring those inner parts forward for healing so they're not suppressing the other parts of you that want to explore all the opportunities that can be offered to you in this physical world. So looking at this world as a place of growth, of learning and expansion, you could bring these parts forward and feel into their energy and remind these parts that they belong to you and that they are a valuable part of you, and that they're parts of you you may have rejected at a time you thought the world was rejecting them, and to bring them that higher truth that they are of divine consciousness, that there is nothing wrong with these parts of you, that they only feel bad and disconnected or worried or fearful, but they're feelings based on experiences and not based on the truth. So as long as you can get deep into those parts of you and bring this healing and love and compassion and patience when you're working with these parts, this healing can be done. And then these parts will no longer feel disconnected. They'll feel joined back with the soul. You'll feel whole and balanced again. And then your true inner gifts will emerge. They'll feel a safe place to come out of hiding and be expressed out into the world. And then what happens is the world outside of you begins to look brighter, more opportunist, more engaging. So those are the things that change once you get out of that false energetic self and to fully engage with your true divine energy. So I am going to leave you with that, and just to let you know that every lifetime and every moment of every lifetime is an opportunity to heal your soul burdens and live like the miracle you are. Now, please stay tuned for the next part of this series, because we're going to be talking about karma and soul patterns. And again, if you've missed any part of this series, you can catch it right here on this channel. And if you like what you're seeing, please hit the like button and please share. And don't forget to subscribe. And if you want notifications, just hit that little bell and you'll be notified when other videos are up. So sending you off with many blessings, and stay well and give your soul some love today.